Welcome to Prepare for Takeoff. I'm the creator and host, Terry L. Cyrus. We're the podcast dedicated to amplifying Black excellence. Every week, we sit down with a proven professional or a rising entrepreneur. And this week, we're sitting down with Chief Inclusion and Impact Officer of FleishmanHillard and founder of the Can Diversity Collective, Adrianne C. Smith. Adrianne, what's going on?
Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for giving us some of your time. I know you have a very busy schedule between jet setting with your role as a senior executive and a founder of your own organization. And what we want to do is we're all about giving people their flowers, their much deserved. Black excellence is something that we like to amplify, not just 1 month out of the year. That's something that we do on a weekly basis. So we're just so happy that we're able to highlight you and share your journey with our viewers and listeners. So with that being said, your journey, it didn't start in New York City. It started in Alabama, I believe. Is that correct?
That's right, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
What was it like growing up in Alabama?
So interestingly enough, it was a special environment. The thing about the South is, if we're even talking about race relations, everybody sort of knows where they stand. So I grew up in a very supportive environment from my parents. I think sort of my spirit of inclusion came from where I was growing up and how I grew up. My mother was Christian, my father was Muslim. So we just had this very respectful, inclusive household. I am not like an Army brat, but I am an HBCU brat. I grew up on the campus of Spelman College in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and then later moved to Talladega, Alabama, and Marshall, Texas, where Wiley College is located. And that is the place where the great debaters, where the film with Denzel Washington, I don't know if you've seen that, but that's what that was actually about.
So the HBCU community definitely had an impact on your development at an early age. So too, from my early stages of development in my childhood, having grown up in the shadows of West Virginia State University. So just having that exposure to the HBCU community, how did it shape you as a young person growing up in your developmental years?
Yeah, well, for one thing, there was no doubt what I would do once I got out of high school, right? It was always a given. You go to high school and then you go to college. What was the tricky thing was whether I would go to a PWI or HBCU. And based on my parents' conversation, if I wanted my college, or at least the first 2 years, to be paid for, I had to go to an HBCU. And then once I figured out what I wanted to do, then I could possibly go somewhere else. But they weren't going to pay for anywhere else but an HBCU. So growing up in that environment and understanding the importance and sort of the legacy and history and value of what HBCUs did to young Black professionals, it was just sort of embedded into my DNA, embedded into everything that I imagined I was supposed to do when I grew up.
And so obviously, based on what your parents said, you took them up on your suggestion and you became a student at Spelman College. Is that correct?
Yeah. So let me clear something up. It wasn't really a suggestion. It was more of a mandate. You're going to go to an HBCU, bottom line. So my oldest brother who's 10 years older than me, he went to Morehouse College. My next two siblings, who are twins, one went to Spelman, one went to Stillman College in Tuscaloosa, and then the one that's closest to me, she went to Alabama State in Montgomery, Alabama. So, but I've even known what college I wanted to go to since I was 7 years old. So, quick story, my oldest brother, like I said, he went to Morehouse College. So when he came home with his freshman yearbook, of course, as any 7-year-old, you're grabbing the book, you're looking through and you're flipping through the pages. And I saw an 8x10 glossy of Miss Maroon and White, which essentially is like their homecoming queen. And
Right.
I was like, oh my God, like, wow, at 7 years old, I want to be her. I want to have my picture in this book. And he's like, listen, the only way that you can get your picture in this book is that you have to go to Spelman College. And that's it. You just have to go to Spelman College. So at 7 years old, I was like, bet, I'm going to Spelman College. And I didn't apply to any other school because at 7, I knew that's where I was going. And so end of story. Just so happens that my senior year of high school, I ended up going to school in Marshall, Texas. Took all the SATs, the ACT, and give you this opportunity to put where you want to have your test scores sent to, of course, Spelman #1. That's where I wanted to go.
Mhm.
Everything else was like ancillary. It didn't even matter. And then I found out when everybody else was getting their acceptance letters that I never heard anything back from Spelman. So I was just like, well, what's going on? Mom, help me, call somebody. Please let me know. So she called Spelman, and apparently my application was incomplete because my senior counselor, who probably just did not know the value of why I chose Spelman College, she
Hmm.
neglected to put the back of my test scores on my transcript, that you're supposed to submit. So Spelman didn't even consider me for acceptance. And they told my mom, all the classrooms were filled, all the dorms were filled, and there was no hope for me to go to Spelman College. So, as you can imagine, I was devastated. I don't know if anybody remembers Marsha Brady from the Brady Bunch when she would throw herself against, or Jan would throw herself against the wall, like, my mom's like, snap out of it, girl, pull yourself together. So it just so happens that my sophomore counselor, guidance counselor, was a Black woman. She knew the value of Spelman College. Like, she got it. And let me just tell you how, if people don't believe in God, you got to believe in a higher power because it's in your favor. And what it means when you put something out in the universe that you want to happen and you can
Hmm.
will it your way. It just so happened that this woman who was on the board of directors at Spelman College was coming to Marshall, Texas. Now, I don't think you guys understand what I said, right? This board of directors lady was coming to Marshall, Texas. Marshall, Texas is like in what they call the Arklatex. So it's only like 20,000 people in the whole town, right? You have to fly to Shreveport, Louisiana, and drive 35 miles into Texas to get there. George Foreman, you remember the boxer, he was from Marshall, Texas. So in my mind, there's no reason why this woman should be coming to Marshall, Texas, but she was. And so my counselor was like, she's going to be here. She's going to be speaking at the Marshall Civic Center. Go there, listen to the panel talk or whatever session was going on. And then afterwards, go tell her your problem. So I was like doing it, right? So went by myself, 18-year-old girl, sat through the whole program, went up to her after the program, and I said, ma'am, this is my dream. I did everything I was supposed to do, and I wasn't even considered because of somebody else's mistake. I wasn't considered for acceptance. And she said, well, I tell you what to do. Write a letter to Dr. Janetta Cole, who was the president at that time. Tell her your story, put my name in the letter, and see what happens. How about 2 weeks later, I got a letter that said, welcome to Spelman College. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So it was just like this thing in my mind that was meant to be for me to be at Spelman College. So, that was a long way of saying that I was supposed to be where I was. And then 3 years later, I called my brother up to say, hey, I got my picture in the book. And he was like, no. And I was like, yes, I had become Miss Maroon and White, which was, Morehouse College's homecoming queen. And then honestly, after that, I didn't know what I was supposed to do because I only went to Spelman to get my picture in the book. And after that, I was like, now what? Right now,
Yeah, you said, okay, so I got to figure it out from this
yeah,
point.
now I got to figure it out. So it was a whole situation. That 7-year-old dream had manifested itself, and everything that I did to that point sort of took charge, and the universe conspired with me to make sure that I was able to go to Spelman College and get my picture in the book.
But you were very determined at a very early age. That's what I'm hearing. You, no matter what, you wasn't taking no for an answer, and you knew what it is you wanted to do at
That's right.
7 years old, and you never wavered.
No, I had no choice. Like, I was going to go to Spelman College because I needed to be there for sure.
So now once you got to Spelman, you became homecoming queen and you went there, and I'm sure the experience in and of itself was transformative to say the least. So what did you find yourself doing after you graduated as far as figuring it out?
Well, let me just kind of talk to you about my Spelman experience, which I'm being very transparent, and I hope you don't have any parents out there or young people out there who are just firm believers in academic excellence, because that probably wasn't my ministry. I graduated with a thank you, Lottie degree. My parents were really not excited about my academic experience. As a matter of fact, that semester when I was the homecoming queen, I failed that semester. Like, I had a 1.8 GPA and had
Mm.
dropped my GPA all the way down. Although I had been on the dean's list for my freshman and sophomore year, but when I came to fill my dream, it just kind of went out the window. But
Right.
what that taught me was you have to just kind of live in a very determined way, because my parents would try to play these Jedi mind tricks on me by like, listen, you failed this whole semester number one, you're going to pay for it. Like, this is on you. You have to pay for this one. And they made me pay for that semester. And then the other thing they would do, my mom, God rest her soul, would send me, I don't know if you guys remember, like clippings from the newspaper, like the one ads that were in the newspaper, and that's how you found out about jobs. She would send me newspaper clippings of jobs that I could possibly get with my GPA. And one of them was like the manager of this place called Glamour Shots. Glamour Shots was like this studio in the mall where you could like put like boas on your neck. And I was like,
Right.
she's like, you're going to have to move back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and you're going to have to work at Glamour Shots. And I was like, listen, lady, that is not what's going to happen to me. So I was determined to like figure it out, like what I was going to do, where I was going to go. I wish I could say I'd interned in the right way. I did not. I just sort of found out haphazardly, maybe my senior year, and I had to spend an extra semester at Spelman because of that semester that I failed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably when I finally discovered that we had a whole career center where you could actually find jobs. You could figure it out. But I had an opportunity to go to a career center. I think one summer I was inspired to get a real internship and found a way to work for this company called Telerep, which is in the television advertising sales group. So back in the day, when there was like not a lot of television networks, there was like ABC, CBS, the main ones, and they had organizations that sold their local advertising time. So I ended up working for a network of stations, or a network of rep firm that sold for a network of stations advertising time. So that was my entry point into the advertising, marketing, public relations business, just on the backside of it. Just understanding how commercials actually got placed into television. It's a whole business. I worked there for a summer and then ended up getting an interview for a job at Leo Burnett, which was like, of course, one of the best advertising industries in the country at the time, in the world. And was able to use the skills that I learned in that one summer. That one time I decided to do a summer internship that didn't pay, by the way. So I had to have a retail job. So I was doing that in the daytime and working at night in retail, but definitely getting that experience of learning how to understand a business there. But that job was sort of the entry point for me to getting to the advertising world, which I ended up getting a job at Leo Burnett as a media buyer planner back then.
So
hopefully that answered the question.
did you always know you wanted to go into advertising at that stage, or was that something that when you went to the career center, that was the opportunity that was put in front of you, you said, okay, let me run with it?
Yeah, that was the opportunity. I changed my major 3 times when I was in college. I think I started off as a math major because someone talked about, being in actuarial science and you need to be a math major, and actuarial scientists made lots of money. And those are the people who predict what the insurance rates are. Like, that's the type of work that I do.
Right.
Listen, that's not me. I started off as a math major. And when the math started turning into words, like the word problems, that's when I was like, wait a minute, what happened to all the numbers? So I was getting into a lot of critical thinking that I wasn't prepared for at the time. As a matter of fact, I think one of the head of the math department said, like, what did you really come to Spelman for? And I was like, maybe that's a trick question, because if I tell them the truth, that I can't look the woman right. Needless to say, they probably kicked me out of the math department. And then at that point, I think I tried to be political science because maybe I wanted to be a lawyer, and ended up being an English major because I was able to kind of crash and get all these English courses in. So it was a lot of reading and writing, and a semester or a year and a half to be able to get out of school. So yeah, it was not a place and space that I thought I would be in, because I thought I wanted to be something like a lawyer, maybe. Took the LSAT. You can just say I took the test and walked out of the room. That's how I performed on that test. So it wasn't, again, a part of my ministry of what I was supposed to be doing in my life. But I do recall one thing that I did want to do, and it was to become a motivational speaker. And I think that came because when I was younger, I saw folks like Naeem Akbar, who really inspired me. I saw Patricia Russell McLeod, who, these were these dynamic speakers who like could move a crowd and just like gets you to be so inspired and just kind of want to change the world. So at that point, I think if I wanted to do anything or become anything that sort of sticks with me now was to be a motivational speaker. So I remember sitting on one of my best friend's floors, and we had this big poster board, and we wrote out what that would look like. And we named the company Vision Corps, and the people who worked for Vision Corps would be called Visioneers. And Visioneers were social engineers who would help to structure the future and strategy of young people. And so that was the kind of game plan that we wrote out on an orange poster board and big markers, and just set it aside. And so I had to move towards doing something that would allow me to become a motivational speaker. So if there was anything, I think it was that, now that I think about it. So thanks for triggering that thought in my head. That's the one thing I think that is true to form to, I think, of what I do today happened on that floor in an Atlanta apartment on some orange poster board.
When we look back, we can kind of figure out things in retrospect. But when you're young, you're figuring it out. And more times than not, whatever opportunity presents itself to you, you'll dive in. And then based on what the result of that dive consists of, you'll decide to stay in the pool or get out of the pool.
That's right.
So you stayed in the pool of advertising. Now from advertising, is that a job that you transitioned right into after you graduated from Spelman?
Yep. So that was my first job out of college, working at Leo Burnett, like I said, which was one of the largest advertising companies. And then I had an opportunity to switch sides. So I was a media buyer planner. So we're the people who actually evaluate television programs to decide what brands will actually go into a commercial spot. So there's a whole business and a whole team of people who will determine what spots actually go into the Super Bowl. And of course, it's money, but there's a whole planning strategy that goes out to determine what brands are a best fit for what television show and news programming and all of that. So I switched sides after working about a year and a half at Leo Burnett and went into advertising sales. So I started selling. I worked for a company called the African Heritage Network, which was started by an entrepreneur, Frank Mercado Valdez, who had this vision to provide alternative programming to people of color, Black people in particular, who didn't necessarily see themselves on the TV screen. So he did this thing, and it was a part of syndicated television. And we'll probably have to have a whole session to talk about the various ways of TV programming and syndication and all those things. But what he did was he would license old Black movies from the movie studios and then repackage them under the guise of African Heritage Network. And we had wraparounds, which were those opening statements with Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee, who would talk about the movie's history and give some background. And we called that syndicated package the African Heritage Network. So that was sort of my first foray into the sales side of it. And then from there, he also developed a program called the Miss Collegiate African American Pageant, which that sort of links back to me being Miss Maroon and White and how I actually met this entrepreneur. Was through this pageant. Wow, you're getting like a whole hodgepodge of stories because it's all connecting back and spinning around. But this Miss Collegiate African American pageant was a collection of all the historically Black college queens would all come together and compete for the honor of being the Black college queen or Miss Collegiate African American. And what was so beautiful, they hosted the show once at Disney World, and it was probably the first organization that sort of wrapped Mickey Mouse in kente cloth. So it was a huge sort of educational thing and just beautiful thing to see, to bring Black culture, African culture into the mainstream. So I was a part of that organization for many years, and then worked for a different company around the time where there's a big internet boom. And I realize I'm totally dating myself right now. When the internet became big. So I worked for a company called Vanguard Media that really, and a part of Vanguard Media was a company called Adhere Network. And that company was going to be like an urban version of DoubleClick. And this group would sell all the advertising space on the internet, but specifically for Black websites. So then there was a whole bust, and I decided to start my own company. And so after that, I worked on my own doing various media marketing projects for clients that I had. So that's kind of what I did. That was up until I decided to come back into the corporate world.
Thinking about starting your own business? Make it real with Shopify. the all-in-one platform trusted by millions to sell online and in person, whether it's merch, art, or digital goods. Shopify gives you the tools to build, grow, and succeed. And here's the best part. When you sign up using the affiliate link in our show notes, you're supporting Prepare for Takeoff and starting your business off right. Click the link and start your free trial today. What sparked that entrepreneur in you? Was it the fact that you were exposed to other entrepreneurs at an early stage of your career, or is that something that you always wanted to do?
I think it's a combination of both. My father was an entrepreneur. He owned real estate. He owned his own business. He had a television repair shop in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So I always saw someone working on for themselves, someone owning property. I saw him be a landlord, and now I'm a landlord. I saw him just creating opportunities for other people to be able to do other things. So I think I grew up with the notion of entrepreneurship in my head, and then being able to work for two great entrepreneurs. One was Keith Clinkscale and the other was Frank Mercado, and just watching them build their businesses and, just realizing and learning from them that I could do this. I could run an organization. I saw the possibilities of what could be. So it was just something that I saw, something that I believed that I could do. And, I always like to be in charge of my destiny, and, being on your own creates that opportunity for you to run your own thing, right? And for you to have the final say. So that's how that entrepreneurship situation came into my life.
I think that me as an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur for over 2+ decades now. Yeah. That's me dating myself. I agree. When you're able to determine your future and the outcome of what life is going to be for you professionally, it's no greater fulfillment to create something out of nothing. It's one thing to have a great job. It's another thing to create a great opportunity. And more times than not, creating a great opportunity, it creates opportunities for other people around you. My father and mother, they weren't entrepreneurs, but some of my uncles were. Similar to yourself, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. My major was business, then I switched to sociology, and then I had jobs in the human services arena since I had a sociology degree. I feel as though me becoming an entrepreneur had a lot to do with my early exposure. My uncle was a barber. That was my mom's brother. And then my mom's other brother, he had a paramedic business. And then I was surrounded by other entrepreneurs in the community. And that was something that was probably in the back of my mind, not necessarily something that I thought I wanted to do, but I knew I was going to go to college. I didn't know, what was going to be for me after college, other than following in the footsteps of my brother and my sister. And the one thing I did know, I knew I was going to leave West Virginia. Oh, I left West Virginia literally the next day after I graduated.
Yeah.
And since I switched my major from business to sociology, and that was just me always wanting to have some type of involvement in the community. I've always liked helping people, things of that nature. So it was like, all right, what can I do that will enable me to show up for other people, right? So I did those type of jobs when I first graduated. And then it took a chance meeting with somebody and he had shared with me, my boyfriend, he's a manager in the music business. And similar to what you said, realizing there's a whole other business behind what I seen on television and heard on the radio. Because of my discipline that I had developed up until that point, Adrianne, I said, you know what? I believe I could do that. I felt like I had the aptitude to do it. And a brother at the time, he worked as a detective, some of it, all these undercover things that they found themselves doing. So literally, I looked at it like the equivalent of going undercover in the sense that I said, people don't know what I do independent of this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to immerse myself into understanding what this business of the music industry consists of. I'm going to read Donald Passman's book, Everything You Need to Know About the Music Business. The music industry, to be exact, that's the name of it. Everything You Need to Know About the Music Industry. And then I'm going to read a few other books. And then once I feel as though I have a handle on what that consists of, Adrianne, I'm going to start going to showcases, like at the Soul Cafe and here and there. Which I'm dating myself too. So, and then I just started to introduce myself as a manager. Hey, I have a management company. I'm in the process of expanding my roster. I was from non-existent to existence.
There you are. That's right.
So, and I've always just had that ability to come in a room and introduce myself and leave there with a plethora of contacts that I went in there without having prior to entering the rooms. that's one of my lessons, if you will, the ability to, make friends.
Superpower.
That's one of my superpowers, right?
Yeah.
And then being a member of the Divine Nine, a proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, that came with a built-in network as well. So I say all that to say that didn't happen until my late 20s. Well, I would say more like 27 and still late 20s. Yeah. And that kind of helped elevate my thinking as it pertains to what I seen to be possible. Right. And as my exposure continues to expand, so too did the possibilities of what I seen for myself. And the people that were doing very well for themselves, it just so happened they were entrepreneurs. Yeah. So it kind of tied me back to the early stages of my childhood, as far as like having seen my uncle have a barbershop, having seen my other uncle have a paramedic business, having seen other people in the communities do well. And then it was something that I said, this speaks to what I want to do.
Right.
And I knew that I've always had the mindset, if they can do it, why can't I do it? Right. And that has propelled me, and I'm sure the same holds true for you. Now, as an entrepreneur, I want to give our viewers and listeners, because I'm sure they've heard my stories as it pertains to the highs and lows of being an entrepreneur. What were some of the things that you had to learn how to manage and highs and lows, if there were any, or some of the things that comes with being an entrepreneur?
I think the main thing is, and I think it's the key, is that you eat what you kill. Right? And so if you're not out in the street hustling, and if you're not out in the street sort of looking for that next opportunity, then you will not eat, you will starve, right? So a part of that was, to your point, always constantly networking and finding ways to build a business, sell yourself. You can tell your story better than anybody can tell your story. And then building relationships with people, because I found that if I didn't have an advertising marketing budget, my biggest sort of assets or promoters were people who I worked with who could tell the story for me. So a lot of my business opportunities, a lot of contracts that I had came not from me necessarily pitching the new business. It came because there were other people who worked with me, knew the type of integrity that I possessed, and knew sort of the value that I could bring to any project or any situation. And that's how I typically got positions, was because my reputation in the relationships that I built, which I'll say is your most valuable asset, are the relationships that you build. So always keep those intact, because they're going to be the people who talk about you, who think about you when they see this opportunity that's available for you, that you can come in and thrive. And some of the times I didn't even know what the positions were, but it's something someone else saw in me and believed, if anybody can do it, Adrianne can make it happen. She's scrappy enough. She thinks outside of the box. She's a strategist at heart and can figure out the best way to make someone else's dream come true. So I did a lot of that because of the relationships that I built. So I guess the top things would be, you only eat what you kill. And the second thing is, the relationships are your currency. All the relationships that you build are your currency.
I couldn't say it better. That was one of the things that was taught to me at a very early stage. One of my colleagues and peers, I consider him now, but at that point in time, I was getting a lot of mentorship because he was far more advanced in understanding the business than me at that point. And he said, this isn't the entertainment business. This is the relationships business.
That's right.
And relationships will propel your ability to do business. And that was something that served me really well. And having worked with people like Walter Yetnikoff, the former president and CEO of CBS Records, which is now known as Sony. And I remember one time he said to me, we were working on some different projects. And he said, Cyrus, is there anyone you don't know? I said, Walter, if I don't know if I can get to him. I'll find a way. And I really believe that once you find your calling, once you find something that you're passionate about, then you will often excel at that thing, because we all have a calling on us.
Right.
And we have to embrace what that calling consists of. We have to not allow fear to rob us of the blessing that God has bestowed on us as far as that calling. So you as an entrepreneur, you having been able to be a force multiplier in the eyes of others in the different roles that you would serve. Now, what were some of the things that, as far as projects, I know you mentioned there's a lot of things that many of the people that privileged you to opportunities. You didn't see that in yourself, but they seen it in you. What were some of those projects or opportunities that you were presented and were able to excel at?
I would say early on I worked for the company, and a dear friend of mine, David Prince, who passed away during COVID, he recommended me for two opportunities. One was to work with an organization called A Partnership, which was an Asian advertising agency in conjunction with his organization. And we ended up working on a campaign for the government called Verb, which was very similar to actual Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, but it was pre-Michelle Obama. But it was called Verb, It's What You Do. And I was a part of the team that helped to bring in talent and take talent to various cities to do activations. And one of the talent was Bow Wow at the time. So that's really dating me when he was called Lil Bow Wow, right? He was Lil Bow Wow at the time. So we took him around the country to just go to various community organizations so that he could encourage people to get engaged, get involved, and then he would do like a major concert in the area. So it was a link to his tour. And then the other opportunity he connected me with, which I think, if I really think about it, is sort of the foundation of a lot of the other things that I do now, which was I became the first executive director for the Center for Excellence in Advertising at Howard University. And the whole point and purpose for that was to bring in, more people of color into the advertising industry. I mean, very much like you see today, there is a limited amount of people of color in the advertising and marketing industry on the business side. And so what we were tasked to do, or what I was tasked to do, was create a new pipeline for advertising executives in this world. So we had two programs. One was called the Lateral Mover Program, and the other was called the Next Generation Program. And I would say about 68% of those folks who were in our program, and I think that stat is still the same, are still in the advertising industry today and in very positive positions. It's all been aligned with creating talent and development and providing access and opportunities for communities that normally don't get access. And so, as we talk about thinking back and making that connection, that's still a part of the work that I do even today.
That's great. I would say the best way to describe your journey, you sound like a real life superhero. You've worn all these different hats. You've been a global director. You've been a senior executive. You've been an entrepreneur. I'm sure time management plays a huge part. I know it does for me. I find myself juggling a multitude of different things. Now, were you operating as it sounds as though you do now? You're a senior executive, but you also have your own shop. So how are you able to juggle those things? Do those things kind of complement one another as it pertains to the work that you're doing, or are they independent of each other?
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about what I do as my passion project. It definitely complements my day job as a Chief Inclusion and Impact Officer. So my passion project is all about providing access and opportunities for people of color or underrepresented communities who traditionally don't have access to, say, large conferences like the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity, or during Davos, during the World Economic Forums. I've created platforms that provide access and opportunities and gives young people from HBCUs on up to middle managers at organizations to now attend, through our ambassador program, these festivals free of charge for them to be able to just experience and explore and learn more, which in turn sort of inspires that next group of people. So we've had a lot of people come and volunteer that passion project. Everybody's still a volunteer. I'm a volunteer, which is why I still have my day job, to be able to make sure that, no matter what, hook or crook, we're going to be able to get some heavy influence and some heavy opportunities so people can see the power of what's possible, right? And you don't necessarily have to be a part of a major organization to be able to get something unimaginably done, right? So through sort of a vision and inspiration, maybe it's been my calling since I was a young person, and that idea of wanting to become a motivational speaker put me in a position to create opportunities for other people to speak and have a platform and tell their story. which then elevates me to an opportunity to tell their story about how we create opportunities for them. So it all aligned, and I made sure when I was interviewing for the current position that I hold was to say I do have a passion project that I don't want to give up, but it is heavily aligned to the current work that I do. So there are definitely some intersections for opportunities for and moments of exposure that probably your day job may not have been considered doing, but now because you introduce them to this world and ways of getting engaged and involved, it's everything. Like, for instance, in Davos during the World Economic Forum, we do Inkwell Beach Davos on this beautiful mountaintop. And I had my CEO of FleishmanHillard, we shared the same stage. So I think when you create opportunities, that's sort of the win-win situation that are mutually beneficial for you, and it's on strategy and it's on point and it just makes sense. So I think that's the way I've been able to successfully navigate through this path. So you just have to make sure all those worlds align. It's just naturally a part of what I do. I always say it's a part of my DNA. So that's how it works.
This episode of Prepare for Takeoff is brought to you in part by Riverside, the platform that I trust to record studio quality podcasts right from my laptop. With Riverside, I get crystal clear audio and 4K video. Plus, it's super easy to use. Whether you're a beginner or a pro, Riverside helps your podcast sound amazing. Try it out for yourself. Click the affiliate link in our show notes and start recording like a pro with Riverside. I found myself in that position as well, having worked in television as an executive producer and having my own company. The two worlds definitely complemented one another as it pertains to resources that I was able to walk in the door with in relationships and things of that nature, and the ability to give us a presence in places that, to your exact point, they probably weren't otherwise considering. And as it relates to things that we know to be, okay, you have to have a presence at Essence. You have to have a presence in ABFF. You have to have a presence in Urban World. But people who are outside of the culture, they may not necessarily know that. They may only know about the Grammys, the Emmys, the Oscars, but there's a whole other thing that we know to come with impact and influence. And so I'm certain that you being able to walk into those doors with that expertise and that understanding, it serves you well in your current role. As we close out, I wanted to give you the opportunity to leave our viewers and listeners with 3 things that you feel will help them prepare for takeoff.
Oh, wow, that's a really great question. I would say the first thing would be creating opportunities for yourself, right? If you can bet on yourself and what you believe in. And I think this is really stemming from being ambitious and creating agency for yourself, right? Like having a vision. You can't be what you can't see, and just knowing that you have to believe in yourself, right? I would say if you see there's a table and there's not a seat for you at the table, create your own table. You've heard all those things. Take a risk on yourself, create the opportunity. If you see there's a gap, that's your area of opportunity because you saw it, and it's your opportunity to fill it. It's what happened with the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity. They didn't have an inclusion activation, or they didn't have an activation where, or hell, they didn't even have a lot of Black people there, right? And this festival had been going on for over 60 plus years. The first year I went was in 2017. And out of the 20,000 people in attendance there, only 200 look like us. And apparently that was a really good year. And I tell this story often that the topic of conversation was, how can we make the festival more inclusive? And I thought, this is a trick question, because all you have to do is invite people here. You have to let people know this festival exists. So that's when I started the Can Diversity Collective and started bringing young people to the festival and created the platform or the stage of Inkwell Beach Can, and tethering it to the Martha's Vineyard Inkwell Beach, and how that space in Martha's Vineyard is sort of a space of respite, but it creates moments of connectivity for us to then go back out to collaborate while we're there, and then go back out to the rest of the world and be able to build something amazing. That's sort of the foundation of Inkwell Beach Can. And so if you go back there today in June in 2026, you'll never have to experience what I experienced in 2017, because it's more of us there starting our own activations, creating moments of access and opportunity, making it possible so that there's the 200 people that were there in 2017 aren't just the help or the entertainment, but
Mm-hmm.
now they're the folks who are the strategists, the marketing executives, the president and CEOs of various companies and brands. They're there in mass numbers, whereas before they weren't even invited, right? So
Right.
now they're actively a part of that. I do the same thing in Davos during the World Economic Forum. This is world leaders, presidents of organizations, presidents of countries, and just leaders of the world. But now we've brought this fringe event to this festival, to this conference, where you have more in-depth and rich conversations about sort of that global economic space, this space that goes beyond like what's in that centered room or that centered design space in that one box. But on the fringe is where all the work happens, right? That's
Right.
where you get all the collaboration and the true movement happens. So being able to have what I call a sacred space for everyone to come, everyone is welcome to this space to be able to collaborate and come up with the best of best ideas to go back out and help that next generation. That's what happens. So I am a firm believer in succession planning. So I'll let that be my second point of create an opportunity for the next generation behind you. Don't hold on to it for yourself, because build a legacy, create the opportunity for someone to come behind you and keep the doors open that were once closed to you. It's like the best thing that could ever happen. And don't forget your history. Don't forget where you came from. Your history is a rich thing. Know where you come from, because it gives you sort of that whole point of purpose of life. Real quick story. I had my African ancestry done. Turns out that my mother's lineage is from Sierra Leone. And within Sierra Leone, they're part of this secret society from the Mende tribe called Sandy. And the Sandy women are the ones who ushered in the next generation of young women, right? They were the ones who conducted the rites of passage. So what that told me, based off of the work that I do right now, that this is in my DNA. There's nothing I can do about it. If I wanted to stop, I can't. Because those old ladies from generations before, like, girlfriend, you got work to do. Get up. Keep pulling it through. Keep pulling in that next generation of leaders, of women, of young men, of all races and kind, to just be able to continue to build the world that we want to see. And I'd say probably the last thing is, if you can lead by example. I have this phrase I always say, don't talk about it, be about it. That's what we have to do, right? Just lead by example and do the work that you talk about doing. So that's a constant reminder to myself, even just to say, oh, I wish I could do this, then do it. You know, it only, if you're not going to be in the game, and I always say I never wanted to live I woulda, coulda, shoulda if I had a life. So I just try. I keep trying, and you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. As many people know, all my stuff don't shine just right, right? But the fact is, I stepped into the game and created an opportunity for other people to help perfect and make more important.
I wanted to thank you for spending so much time with us.
Yes.
And you are truly the epitome of somebody who's walking in her purpose on purpose. And we're always encouraging people to pursue their passion, and you're doing that, and you're staying true to your ancestry and your lineage, and you continue to pay it forward. So I wanted to thank you once again for spending so much time with us today. And I also wanted to thank our viewers and listeners, whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're watching us on Spotify, or you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeart, or Pandora. As you know, every week we're going to continue to bring you proven professionals, rising entrepreneurs, and all of these conversations, just like this one, will help you prepare for takeoff. Adrianne, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.